All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a really close look at the recent US-Iran peace deal, but we're doing it through a pretty powerful historical lens, the Palace of Versailles. I mean, history has literally been made within the walls of this magnificent palace time and time again. It served as a global stage for some of the biggest international treaties ever signed. We're talking about a location that holds just immense weight in world diplomacy. And to truly grasp the gravity of what's happening there today, we kind of have to look back at the massive precedent it set a whole century ago. So the source material immediately hits us with a really heavy question. As this monumental deal is signed, is history just destined to repeat itself? You know, when major world powers gather at a location that is so deeply embedded in the history of war and peace, it absolutely forces us to look backward to figure out where we're going. Can the outcomes of the past actually offer us a window into the future? That's exactly the diplomatic puzzle we're going to break down for you.
Now, think about this historical split screen for a second. On one side, we have the modern agreement between Washington and Tehran, signed by US President Trump and Iran's President Pezeshkian. And then, right alongside it, the very same location hosting the end of the First World War in 1919. It's a profound parallel, bridging two entirely different eras. But it really begs the question, why does a treaty from over 100 years ago cast such a long, dark shadow over any document signed in that exact same room today?
Well, to understand the sheer weight of this, we have to go back to June 28, 1919 in the Treaty of Versailles. This agreement formally brought an end to the First World War. Europe had literally been burning for 5 agonizing years. This was supposed to be it, right? The treaty to end all wars. But spoiler alert, it wasn't. Instead, its incredibly fraught terms basically planted the seeds for something far, far worse.
See, the Allied forces didn't just want peace, they wanted payback. The pressure put on Berlin was immense. Germany was stripped of its military, forced to surrender valuable territory, and buried under massive, crippling war debt, all while being forced to take full, 100% responsibility for the entire conflict. This wasn't reconciliation at all. It was total humiliation. And it's this precise diplomatic approach that gives us our first major lesson in how international treaties can completely backfire.
Because when you fracture a nation from the inside out with a peace deal, things get ugly. The intense humiliation felt across Germany permanently crippled the Weimar Republic, which was the moderate government at the time. And you know, when leadership fails to stabilize a deeply angry, economically ruined population, a really dangerous void opens up. Radical nationalist factions stepped right into that void, feeding on all that public resentment. It was basically the perfect incubator for the Nazi Party to find its footing.
And the fallout was terrifyingly fast. By 1921, a young Adolf Hitler was already leading the Nazi Party. Fast forward, barely a decade later to 1932, and a really strong showing in the presidential elections proved he had massive influence over a totally disenfranchised public. That momentum just snowballed, culminating months later in January 1933 when he was officially named Germany's new chancellor.
What followed is honestly a terrifying masterclass in how fragile democracies can be dismantled during a crisis. Just weeks into his chancellorship, the German parliament building, the Reichstag, was set on fire, and Hitler immediately seized the moment. He aggressively blamed communists for the arson, using the whole thing to stoke fear and national panic.
And this perfectly illustrates the domino effect of history. He leveraged that single crisis to push through the Reichstag fire decree. Almost overnight, this single decree severely curtailed civil liberties and basically dismantled the democratic safeguards of the Republic. From a punishing peace treaty to economic ruin, straight to absolute totalitarian control, the path had been completely cleared.
So the spark from that flawed 1919 treaty had now ignited into a full-blown global conflict. The descent was just ruthless. Poland fell in 1939. By 1940, Paris was forced to sign a surrender. And by 1941, the relentless German war machine pivoted east, launching an attack on Russia and pushing all the way to the outskirts of Moscow.
But then, we hit Stalingrad. This brutal clash became the bloody, inevitable climax of the chain reaction that started at the peace table decades prior. Thanks to incredibly fierce Soviet resistance, the Red Army utterly decimated the German Sixth Army. That seemingly unstoppable offensive was broken. The geopolitical pendulum was swinging back, and it was swinging hard. Suddenly, the map of Europe, the one drawn up at Versailles, was being violently erased and redrawn by Allied forces. Through a massive, coordinated counteroffensive, the momentum shifted. Italy was invaded and Mussolini toppled.
Operation Overlord launched the largest amphibious invasion in history on the beaches of Normandy. And by August 1944, Paris was finally liberated. By December 1944, the regime's final, desperate counteroffensives completely collapsed. The tank was literally running on empty. With severe fuel shortages and the Allies completely controlling the skies, the sheer logistical nightmare finally caught up with the ambition. The German military apparatus was in its final collapse. Flash forward to April 30, 1945. With Soviet forces launching a massive artillery assault right into the heart of Berlin, Hitler recognizes absolute military defeat and ends his life. This brought an end to the Nazi regime. The war in Europe was drawing to a close, but the true horrifying accounting of its cost, that was only just beginning.
70 to 85 million lives lost globally. Just let that sink in for a second. It's a human cost so staggeringly high, it almost defies comprehension. This is the ultimate, devastating consequence of the geopolitical instability that was seeded years prior. And the horrors extended way beyond the battlefield. Nazi Germany systematically murdered anywhere from 11 to 17 million innocent civilians. These weren't casualties caught in the crossfire. This was a deliberate, systematic eradication of human life, showcasing the absolute darkest depths of radical ideology.
That includes the targeted execution of 6 million Jewish people by the Nazi Party. It cemented the era as one of the darkest chapters in all of human history, a horrific testament to what happens when extreme radicalism goes unchecked on the global stage. And again, it's a historical tragedy directly tied back to the chain of events set in motion at the end of the First World War.
Which brings us right back to the present day, back to the exact same halls of Versailles. As President Trump and President Pezeshkian sign this new agreement, they aren't just signing a piece of paper, they're stepping into history's shadow. The lesson of 1919 is crystal clear. Treaties meant to punish rather than heal can ignite the world. So the ultimate takeaway from our explainer today is that diplomacy is incredibly delicate. As these new treaties are forged, we're left to ask ourselves, will modern diplomacy heed that warning, or are we just setting the stage for the next great tragedy?